Welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, I want to talk about one of the more long-term plays I've been doing in this hobby, and it is something that I've talked about on this channel, but I never really did a deep dive on it. And for me, when it comes to investing in the hobby, it really boils down to two things. One, the short term, and two, the long term. And for me, the short term is really almost a requirement for me because in order for me to continue to grow my collection, I constantly have to do, more of that rip, grade, buy raw, grade cards, do it more for the what I would consider a short term. And then for me, my long-term plays have always been more part of my actual collection, and it's just been appreciation that way. But in today's example, it's definitely going to be a little bit more of a long-term play, but it's definitely pretty far removed out of my actual collection. Play I've been doing is picking up a lot of graded cards, but cards graded by maybe the lesser known or not as well respected grading card companies, because right now there's a lot of good deals out there if you know what you're looking for. This path could be extremely beneficial for people in the long term. I just have to give you a huge bit of warning. If you are not super familiar with grading skills, if you're not super familiar with true rarity and scarcity, you could really get burned in the long run doing this. And there's a multitude of reasons why this is dangerous. One, if you really truly do not understand grading skills and you buy, say, another company's 10 and you expect it to cross over to a PSA 10, but that card has some very obvious whitening, centering issues, corner issues, edges issues. Surface will always be hard to see, but if it has these obvious issues and you're just ignoring them because you're only looking at the grade of the card and ignoring everything else, there's a potential when you go to cross grade these cards, it can come in at a much lower, number. Don't get me wrong. There's no reason why you can't take a card that graded a 10 for one company and cross-grade it over to a PSA 10 if in reality that card truly is a 10, meaning that card truly is gem mint. But you just got to be very careful when you're doing this. But the reason why I say that, there's a lot of opportunities to be out there because a lot of these more gem mint type cards that are being slabbed and graded by these, Joe Smo, mom and pop type graders, they're just selling at such a low dollar amount. And in fact, for a lot of these cards that are in fact gem mint, they're selling very close to like the raw prices for these cards. And a lot of the time, raw prices really, you're looking at 7s or 8s. So if you do get the potential for a true gem mint card for almost raw prices, there's a ton of opportunity out there. Again, it comes with a ton of risks, especially when I talk about that rarity and scarcity factor. Because if you're going to go after some cards that are more on the lower end, you have to remember something very important. If you're going to go the cross grade these cards, one, PSA is really, the company I'm talking about for cross grading these cards, but we have no clue when PSA will open up its lower bulk tiers. And if they ever do open up those lower bulk tiers, no one really knows with 100% certainty what those price points are going to be for those bulk tiers and how low those prices will actually be. There's a lot of different arguments going on of what the prices can be, but just be very mindful that a lot of this could take years, could take months, could take years. Something to keep in mind that there could potentially be a lot of people out there who have already graded that card at PSA, whatever card you're looking at, in order to try the cross grade in the future. And the people who have already had that card graded or have those cards at PSA right now and just waiting for their returns to come back, something extremely, extremely important to keep in mind, that their price points to have that card graded will be substantially lower than yours. So they will have more flexibility and more room to sell that card for much cheaper than maybe you will. So there's a lot of cards that could really fall within that super dangerous zone. And that super dangerous zone for me is really like that $60 to $80 mark. Where yeah, maybe you can get a slab gem mint card from a mom and pop grader for $30. Eventually, given enough time, hopefully, PSA's bulk prices drop down to 20. Probably in all likelihood, bulk prices will drop down to like 50 in any sort of near future. So there's a huge potential that you actually lose money cross-grading these cards. But in today's video, that's not really the cards I'm talking about. The cards I'm talking about are more of those, call it higher end type cards where, a PSA 10 of that card is maybe selling for around $400, and a gem mint copy from a lesser known grading card company is selling between $90 and $100. Now, there is potentially a huge, like area in there for a ton of profit to be made. But like I said, there's a ton of risk, and that big risk definitely being the uncertainty of how long you're actually going to have to sit on that card in order to see any sort of returns. Because right now, a lot of people are just focusing on the grading company, and they're not so much focusing on the actual condition of the card. And I wish that that was different, and I wish that people could look at maybe say a CGC 9.5 versus a weak PSA 10 and value those cards similar. I want to say that I wish that would happen, but it's just not the case. Truthfully, a CGC 9.5 sells for less than a PSA 10. Whether or not the quality or is comparable to those two cards really doesn't matter. And the reason why it doesn't matter is just that the market value those cards so much differently. And yeah, have we seen a lot of CGC like perfect 10s, some pristine 10s sell for a higher dollar amount than, say, a PSA 10? Yes, we have seen that. And that's nothing new, because forever we've always seen a BGS pristine 10 or a BGS black label 10 always sell for a premium over a PSA 10. But I just got to tell you right now, your chances of getting a CGC pristine 10 or a CGC perfect 10 is so unlikely versus your chances of getting a PSA 10. It's like night and day. And any of you guys that have submitted a lot of cards now to the CGC have all found that out, especially if you've had experience submitting the PSA in the past. Honestly, if you know what you're doing and you know what to look for, the opportunity cost in cross-grading cards in the future could potentially be huge. Because I don't believe a lot of these mom and pop grading card companies will really last for the long term. I think we'll see a lot of different companies get weeded out. And honestly, there's just so many people out there who wouldn't even try to attempt this. And the reason why they wouldn't try to attempt this is because, like I said, they really do not know what they're looking at when it comes to graded cards. Their familiarity with a true gem mint card, being able to identify it, they will just be absolutely blinded by that other grading card company's label. They will not be able to see past that. They will never in a million years think that a different grading card company's Gem Mint 10 could ever cross grade over to a PSA 10. Even if you were to take a PSA 10 card, crack that slab, and send that card which graded a PSA 10 to that other grading card company and get a 10, they would still instantly subtract so much money from that card. But, like I said, there's a ton of danger that comes with it. And I'm going to repeat myself because it's so important. That if you don't know what you're looking for when it comes to quality of grades, you can definitely really get burned in this. But if you know what you're looking for, like I said, that opportunity cost could potentially be huge. And I've already proved it to you guys with a card in the past. I took a GMA Shadowless Red Cheek Pikachu that graded a 7.5, and I instantly recognized that that card was graded too low. I cross-graded over to CGC, got all subgrades, and that card graded an 8.5 at CGC. It literally graded one entire grade higher than that GMA card. So there are cards out there that are potentially even graded lower than some of these grading card standards. But really, I think the biggest opportunity cost that you're really going to find if you're really looking for more reliable grades that will cross over higher to PSA is definitely a lot of these CGC 9s, some of these CGC, definitely CGC 9.5s, I think a lot of these cards really have high potential for crossovers to high, either definitely a 9 for a PSA or a PSA 10. And even PSA 9s carry such a strong weight opposed to a CGC 9. And if you start to see a lot of these opportunity costs, there could be the potential in the future to really do well, if especially if you're acquiring a lot of these cards. But like I said, that opportunity cost or is so far in the future, and it's so much uncertainty that comes with it. So that's why it really will need to be a long-term play. And if you're going to do this, keep in mind that you could potentially sit on these cards for a very long time. So that's why, I talked about it not really being part of your collection. But if you're able to absorb some of these other grading card company slabs into your collection and not just be super biased because maybe they're not a CGC label or a Beckett label or a PSA label, if you're not blinded by that fact and you are able to just separate yourself from the slab and just look at the condition and the quality of the cards, and then you can start to incorporate those into your collection, I think there is that huge potential for you to do really good in the future. But like I said, I'm not stupid. I understand that there's just people that will never be able to do that. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, if you choose the wrong cards and you don't really understand the true rarity, the true scarcity of some of these cards, you could get burned in the future. Especially if, like, I don't know, I'll just throw out there. If you decide to cross grade a bunch of, say, amazing rares from Vivid Voltage, you're probably going to get burned in the future because the cost isn't really going to be worth it for you in the long term. But if it is more of that high end, very scarce type of card, you could do very well. But more importantly, you have to be really patient if you're going to go this route too, because it's not every day that cards in a very high condition that was graded by a different company come up. But when they do, at least start to keep this in mind and maybe start to make this be one of your more long-term plays. And especially if a lot of these PSA 10s or PSA 9s have gone out of your price range just because, you have a card that as a PSA 9 or 10 is selling between that $400 or $500 range, but you can pick it up in a still gem mint quality for $90. That card maybe is no longer out of your price range. So you have to at least just be a little more acceptant to these cards and look at more the long term and the potential for a lot of these cards. Unless you truly believe that PSA's price points to grade cards really never come down and we never really get, anywhere's close to those old bulk grading costs we've had in the past. And if somebody wants to make that argument, I mean, it's a fair argument if you think about it, because I would say every single price point that PSA drops the price, whether it's from 200 to 150 to 100 to 50 to 30 to 25 to 20 to 10, in which I don't ever think we see $10 a card grading again. But let's just say for the sake of this video, we do see that. Every time PSA drops that price point, whether, like I said, from 150 to 100, the amount of cards that are now going to be on the market that will be needed to be graded at those lower prices, every time they open one of those doors, they're going to get a huge flood of cards. So it could be a really, really long time till we ever see those low tiers be open. And if that's the case, you could really be sitting on these cards for a very, very long term. And like I said, if you need to do more of that short term type investment, a lot of what I need to do in order to continue to grow my collection, you can have a lot of money sit in real stagnant, tied up in some of these really lesser known grading card companies for potentially months to years. And that's something I do not want you guys to lose sight of if this is the path you do consider going. The final thing is, you could ask the question, do you ever in the future see maybe a CGC 9.5 or a Beckett 9.5 really equaling the price of a PSA card? Because if that is the case, and that's something that somebody may believe that they expect to see that in the future, it could make sense to pick up cards at those lower grades if you truly believe in the future those prices are gonna, become much closer than they are right now. My personal opinion is no. We never see that. as much as I understand where you're coming from, as much as I understand that the actual card condition is sometimes superior, I'm going to let you know, people will never be able to separate themselves away from the labels. And that's the entire reason this video exists, because literally people won't be able to separate themselves away from the labels of these higher end cards that are graded by mom and pop grading companies. That's why there's opportunity costs. It's not going to change. And that's just, it is what it is. I know it's not what a lot of people like to hear, but it's just the truth. And is there ever going to be a chance in the future? The answer is probably no. PSA will probably always be king. I don't know what it will really take to knock PSA off the top of that mountain. But, hey guys, I just wanted to give you guys something to think about. You know, continue the discussion, continue to grow in the hobby, continue to make moves, because this is something new for the market. You know, to start looking at these mom and pop grading card companies because of just the absolute shutdown we're seeing at a lot of the more major card companies with turnaround times going crazy. This is a way to adapt to the current market. And I hope you guys are constantly trying to find ways to adapt to the current market, because if you're able to adapt to the current market, you will do good in the long term, as long as you're willing to make those changes and willing to adapt. But other than that, guys, catch you on the next video.